Hey everyone, I'm Emerson from the CameraKit team, and I'm here to talk about BlurKit, a sister project of ours to blur images in Android. And I'm going to walk you through how to get started with BlurKit in your application. I'll show you some basic blurring examples with the two different methods we have, using a blur layout and just calling blur directly. I'll go over those methods one by one, and I'll put a timestamp in the description of when I start the second method if you just want to jump right to that instead. But first we'll get started with the blur layout. For either method, you have to come to the Gradle Scripts, app-level-build.gradle, and we need to add something to the dependencies section. We have to add BlurKit as well as the Kotlin implementation files. While I'm typing this, I'll tell you a bit about BlurKit if you're not already familiar. It takes advantage of scaling and the RenderScript library to create fast blurs of views and bitmaps in Android. So there we go, and we'll sync that up, and we should be good to, wait till this syncs, should be good to go. We are good to go. So next we'll go to Res, Layout, Activity Main. So the way the blur layout implementation works, you create a blur layout in the XML, so I'll do that right now. Now we'll do wrap content and wrap content. We don't need this here, so I can back that up and just put the slash here. Perfect. So you put the blur layout in the activity, and everything beneath the blur layout gets blurred by the layout. So text view we have in there now, it's kind of boring. So we'll add an image view instead. So first I'll grab my image. Nice, peppers and PNG. Okay, so we'll come to Android, switch over to project view, open this up to app, source, main, res, drawable, and we can slap this image file into the drawable folder. Okay. Perfect. So now I'll come to the design tab. Sometimes it's easier to use the design tab than typing your own text in. Image view, drag that, put it right in the middle. We'll go from the drawable in this project, and it's called Peppers, so open that up. And we'll kind of centerize it here, but all we have to do is come over to the right side and add these 4 constraints. So we're in a constraint layout. You can add those 4 constraints and add these and set them all to 0. Okay, so there it shows in our image view. And the image view takes up the whole thing, but our picture's only so big, so it'll be some white space on the top and the bottom. That's okay with me. Next, we'll go to the text again. This blur layout, now I'll cut it, and we'll paste it in down below. Okay, so now the image view is below the blur layout in the order in the hierarchy of its layout. Okay, next thing to do, we'll set some attributes on the blur layout before we go to the Java files. So first thing I'll do is add an ID. It's called blur layout. I'll set this to 150 just to have some nice distinction between sort of display pixels, right? Okay. And then I'll add these 4 constraints in as well. And I'll do this the exact same way to centerize it over the image. Pop those in there. Biff, bam, boom. Perfect. And there are 4 settings we can change in the blur layout. I'll leave it all default for now, so I won't change any of the blur layout settings. And we'll come back to those in a second and kind of play around with the different styles you can get using a blur layout. So next thing we gotta do, come to the activity main. In here, you create a blur layout and call it blur layout. Excellent. Ask us to import it, see it's already imported. Perfect, imported the IO blur layout. Then in here, we set blur layout, you go to find view by ID, r.id. We call it blur layout. Gorgeous. Next, to override 2 functions. One is on start, and the other is on stop. And we put some special blur methods in here. So we'll call super.onStart, and then finally blur layout.onStartBlur. When we stop, we need to call blur layout.pause blur. That'll stop the blur layout from running while the app's not open, and then we'll call super.onStop. Excellent. So now I can run this on our device and you'll see what the blur layout looks like. And next I'll walk you through the 4 parameters that we can change in the layout file, which are blur radius, downscale factor, FPS, and corner radius. So the first thing I'll show is blur radius. So it's app::blk blur radius. And this value ranges between 1 and 25 and inclusive. So we can set this default value is 12. So I'll start by showing you what 25 looks like. So there's 25 set. You can see that on the right side of the screen here. Then I'll back us up, make it 1, so you can see the 2 extremes. And so the higher the number, the coarser the blur will be. So a lower number like 1 you can see is a much clearer image. So I'll put it back to default as 12. So that's what that setting does. Next we'll try downscale factor. This is what gives BlurLayout some of its speed, is scaling down the picture, blurring it, and then scaling that blurred image back up to the full resolution. This allows for much quicker operations when we run the blurring process, and we don't lose any. We lose some clarity, but it doesn't make too much difference in this blurred setting because you're blurring the image anyways. So this number goes between, it's a float between 0 and 0.99. I'll set it to 0.01 so you can see what that looks like. And now back to the default 0.12. And let's next take you to 0.50, for example. You can kind of see what that looks like. And then all the way to 0.99. So 99 is almost no downscale at all. So it looks basically like a normal blurred image, a normal image with nothing blurred. So there's a bit of a balance you have to do between the downscale factor and the blur radius. The defaults again are both 12. It's good to have a low downscale factor to improve the speed of the operation. So you could do something like 6 here, leave it at 12, and it has a nice softer blur. Next thing we'll change is the FPS. Right now, running currently, it's generating 60 blurs a second. So it starts off at 60 FPS. It's blurring it. It says to 0, and then run it again. Now there won't be any refreshes of the blur. Doesn't matter too much on a static image, but if the image is moving, you'll notice this effect much greater. The demo app bundled with BlurKit. Let me actually pull that up. Here's the BlurKit Android repository. And this is what's on GitHub. I'll put the link in the description. But if you go to the demo app main activity, you can see how this blur layout animated, and it moves up and down. And here's what it looks like on screen. From 60 to 5, for example, it'll only update 5 times per second. You can see how much slower that looks. You can go to 0, and it'll just hold a constant blur over no matter what the background is. So it takes that one first grab and then leaves it there for the rest of the frame. But normally default value is 60 FPS. Now I'll go back over to our project. The last thing I'll show you, we added a feature called corner radius, and it's just what it sounds like. It rounds the corners of the image, of the blur layout. And just a bit of a convenience factor if you don't want to have to futz with trying to round the corners yourself. So I'll do something like 30, 20 display pixels here. You can see that it gives a nice rounded off square look. So that's the basics of using BlurKit and a blur layout that you set in the XML. And now we're going to call blurkit.blur directly and see the differences between the layout method and this direct blur method. So let's get started in the activity main XML. First off, we'll get rid of the blur layout. I'll just comment that out for now. And we're going to add a button in here so we can control if the image view is when the image view is blurred. So let's go to the design tab, grab this button, drag it in, and then I'll add these constraints. That looks pretty good. Come back to the text. See, it's called button 2. I'll just call it button. Text has button on it. Looks good. Okay, now back to the main activity, and we'll create a new button. Okay, import that, and now we'll say button equals find view by r.id.button. Okay, hold enter. So now I'll set we'll create an on-click listener. And then I'll set that listener in here. called a button function. Great. Next thing we have to do is set up BlurKit to get ready to blur something in that static fashion I mentioned before. So we'll call BlurKit.init and pass it this context. And see, it imported BlurKit for us up top. That's exactly what we wanted. Alright, so now we can come down to the onClick method and call BlurKit.getInstance, and we'll use the fastBlur function on an image view. So I'll have to set that up. And we give it a passive radius. So we'll do a radius of 12 to start and downscale factor of 0.12 and tell f to be a float. So this call returns a bitmap, and I'll show you what to do with that bitmap as soon as we get image view set up. Up here we're going to create a new image view. Call it image view, and then we'll find our image view by ID down here. Okay. So now we have the image view set up. Come down here and you see that image view got populated. Perfect. Now we can do image view.set bitmap, and it expects a bitmap in here, which is perfect because we can set our BlurKit.getInstance fastBlur as the bitmap of our image view. So you can see the device, and when we click the button, the image is blurred, just like we expected. So there you have it. Those are the two different ways to implement BlurKit in Android Studio: the BlurLayout method and calling Blur directly. They have two different use cases, so you can use either one as you see fit. If you want to contribute to the project or check out what we're working on, visit us over on GitHub. It's CameraKit/BlurKit Android, and you can create some issues, look at the commits. I'd love to get your feedback on the project. And like I said, I'll put all the links in the video description for the sample repo, as well as the timestamps of the different parts of the video. It's great. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait to see what you make with BlurKit. Before I let you go, I would be remiss if I didn't mention CameraKit. CameraKit is the team and project that brought you BlurKit, JPEGKit, and a few other libraries, but our main focus is CameraKit Android. You can find it on GitHub at CameraKit/CameraKit Android, and it wraps the Camera 1 and 2 APIs from Google into a new library that makes it very easy to integrate camera into your Android application. We're currently working on our 1.0.0 release, and that'll bring a lot of stability improvements and new features to the camera and video recording process. If you want to get started, come on over to our GitHub. The main README has some implementation details for the latest version, which is 1.0 beta 3.9, and you can see how to get that set up in your project. We're also working on a whole set of documentation for 1.0 to show you all the different features and things you can modify in CameraKit. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your day.